Hello and welcome to the Eric and Lizz Show, the local, where I do present local businessmen, personalities, businesses, etc., which are located in San Diego County. And today my special guest is Richard Arroyo, attorney at law, which has specialized in the past 34 years in delinquency law. Am I saying that right, Richard?
You are, Eric. Thank you. I practice both criminal defense, both adults and juveniles, and delinquency focuses on juveniles accused of committing crimes.
Yeah. Of course, now many viewers are going to ask, well, why did I just choose you? Well, first of all, you are very active here in the community in Chula Vista. You've been a past president of the Chula Vista Rotary Club. And as far as I know, you're still active in Rotary. So what that makes is that you're giving back a lot to the community and are important to this community. At one point, I even recall you were running for public office. So you are very entwined with this community here in Chula Vista. Of course, I think that criminal law is something that people don't usually talk about because, well, who wants to associate, with a criminal lawyer in regards to, oh, what did I commit? Or what did I do to a fellow citizen that suddenly I find myself, in a situation where I need your services?
No, I agree.
But I can tell everybody he's still a very likable guy.
Well, anytime a person gets accused of a crime, I mean, they need good advice. So, I'm available. Whenever someone needs, to speak to me about what their options are. And I've been doing this for over 35 years, and that is, if I specialize in one area of law, it is criminal defense, both adults and juveniles. And people that know me know that I say it like it is, which I think is very, very important.
Yeah. I mean, you really, it's a subject you can't really sugarcoat. It's very serious, and juveniles have to be represented. And you just recently actually gave a PowerPoint. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. I will bring up the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And if you could just give us the accelerated version.
Absolutely.
Of that PowerPoint.
Yeah, Eric, I created the PowerPoint because I give presentations at different groups. So this is one of the PowerPoints that I created, which here was just an overview of delinquency and dependency law. So that was the topic of this particular PowerPoint.
Okay, so let's go.
All righty. Well, delinquency, once again, I'll define delinquency and dependency, but delinquency is basically any person under the age of 18 that's charged with committing a criminal offense. And that is the key, is the date, on the date that they committed the offense. If they were over the 18, they'd be in the adult system. And the focus of delinquency law of young people is rehabilitation. And I've used this slide to demonstrate that we all make mistakes. I certainly have made mistakes over the years. And here you probably recognize that person on the left. That's Elvis Presley. Yeah. So he obviously became very, very successful. However, he had his ups and downs as well. And on the right hand, the photo on the right hand is, basically, parents, young people making mistakes. But once again, it's not generally a very happy occasion. That's for sure.
That is for sure.
And dependency is an area of juvenile law that basically deals with child abuse. And basically a person, it's either a parent or a guardian, is accused of abusing a child and exposing that child to physical or emotional harm. And the dependency side of juvenile law, the goal is reunification, to try to help the parent reunify with their children. And over the years, I've done both delinquency, which is criminal law representation, and dependency, representing parents accused of abusing their children.
So how, say there is this hypothetical abuse case, who shall, the young, child or teen then reach out to? Is it a scenario where they would reach out directly to you, or would they call someone, like a child county support line? Or
Do you mean the child that's being abused, or the
yes.
parent? Well, I mean, it really depends on the age of the children. There's mandatory reporters in San Diego County, in the state of California. So once again, that's why when children are at school, those are mandatory reporters. And with the children being, with the situation we're going through now, being at home, there's less reports of child abuse because the children aren't going to school. A child might go to school and see a bruise and that type of thing. So the mandatory reporters, those are the medical individuals, school officials, psychologists, law enforcement. These are all mandatory reporters, and that's how the potential harm to a child comes to the attention of Child Protective Services.
Thank you.
And this is I try to demonstrate how the different systems are different. And this is, for instance, a complaint, an adult case, and the legal system seems to be, color is very important to them. So this is an adult complaint, and it's on a white piece of paper. And this is a criminal complaint. It's in a juvenile law situation. In a juvenile law, it's called a petition, and the petitions are always on yellow pieces of paper.
So it's for the clerks to recognize it faster, or?
Well, it's just for some reason, the legal system prefers certain things. For instance, a DUI, where a person can plead guilty, happens to be on a blue piece of paper. So it's just something that there's some logic behind the madness.
Okay.
And this one here, this is a petition on a child abuse and a dependency case. If, for instance, two children are removed from parents for whatever reason, then they will get this blue piece of paper, one for each child, and that basically tells the court why the child was removed from the parents and the protective issue. What was the risk of harm to the child? So it's on a blue piece of paper. And this is the entrance to juvenile court in San Diego County. We have one juvenile court dealing with criminal cases, and this is in Kearny Mesa. And this is just the entrance to juvenile court. And this is a photo of the girls' rehabilitation facility. It's right next to juvenile court in Kearny Mesa. And that's the primary detention facility for teenagers. And this is just two photographs of the entrance to juvenile court. On the left, that's the lobby, and on the right, and then the right, that's basically the hallway where the different courtrooms are. Because juvenile proceedings are confidential, only certain individuals are allowed to go into the court. And that's just a picture of the layout of juvenile court in Meadowlark, Kearny Mesa.
I see. So so these court cases basically really just take place behind closed doors. So there is no chance for anything to leak to the outside. It really stays very privately.
Well, they're supposed to, and they usually do, particularly in child abuse cases. I mean, those are, very, very seldom is the press or the public ever allowed in. On certain criminal cases, depending on the seriousness of the case, although at times a court will allow, depending on the charge, media to enter the courtroom to take a look. That's on a criminal side. But generally speaking, as a general rule, juvenile court proceedings are confidential.
Great.
And this is just a contrast between the interview room on the left-hand side. That is how, when I'm representing an adult client, how the setup is to interview them. In the right-hand side, that is also a waiting area where adults are kept in juvenile court when they have to go to court. Sometimes an adult will have a juvenile court case, even though they're over the age of 18, they're in county jail. And sometimes you have parents that have child abuse cases in juvenile court, but because, and they're in custody and they have to be separated from the juveniles. And this is the juvenile interview area. On the right-hand side, you can see where they might have 5 or 6 juveniles. I mean, of course, they're always separated for any adults. And on the left-hand side, that is where attorneys will sit and they will interview the juveniles right before court.
So, I mean, you said the attorneys are sitting there and I see handcuffs. That's usually not the typical way you would be there.
Well, no, I mean, obviously the attorneys aren't handcuffed. It's all right. The attorneys aren't handcuffed, but this is if I needed to speak to a juvenile right before they go into court. But there's always an opportunity to go to juvenile hall where I can, speak to them in a private room where they're not handcuffed, and it's more of an attorney-client type situation. But this is right in the area before they go into court. If I needed to speak to them, about something real quick.
Wow.
And obviously,
that must be.
I'm sorry?
No, sorry. I was just thinking that must be pretty traumatizing for anybody.
Well, it can be. It can be. Even for an adult that has no, experience in the criminal, being charged with a crime. I mean, it can be a traumatic incident, but, the more involved individuals, whether it's juveniles or adults are, then, the less traumatic it is. But that's why the purpose, once again, in juvenile court with crimes is rehabilitation, to try to get their attention and hopefully they'll do the right thing. Now there's 2 places in San Diego where male juveniles are basically detained. It's kind of like a jail. So we got Juvenile Hall, which is in Kearny Mesa, and then we've got an East Mesa detention facility, which is kind of like a jail. And then here is another picture of the area where you can speak to an attorney, but on the right-hand side, that's the tunnel. So that door that's on the back on the left, that leads to this tunnel, and this directly leads to juvenile hall. So when kids, minors have hearings, they'll basically bring them from juvenile hall and put them in that waiting room, and that's called the tunnel, basically. And this is a typical room, juvenile hall. For kids, and it's very, and sometimes I like to show this to individuals or groups that I'm speaking to for them to kind of understand that it's not a luxury for sure to be detained. No. And this is basically what a juvenile where that person would stay if a judge decides they need to remain detained.
Wow.
So basically, quickly, the difference between adult and juvenile court cases, I mean, they all have, with an adult and a juvenile has same constitutional rights. Yeah. However, an adult is entitled to a jury trial in front of 12 people in the community will decide guilt or innocence. In juvenile court, a judge makes that decision. In adult court, an adult can bail out and be released from jail. In juvenile court, there is no concept of bail. We have a detention hearing, and the judge will decide either the person is going to remain detained or they're going to be allowed to be at home on house arrest, for instance, juvenile hall and county jail, for instance. And once again, I've mentioned the focus in adult court, how I try to explain it as private. In juvenile court as rehabilitation, and a lot of times in adult court, a person will plead guilty. In juvenile court, we never use that word, not supposed to use that word. It's either a true finding, and that's some of the basic differences.
Is there any maximum penalty as a juvenile?
Each time someone is accused of a crime, whether it's an adult or a juvenile, there's always a maximum. For instance, a residential burglary where you go into someone's house, to steal something, the maximum punishment is 6 years in custody. If it's an adult, it would be 6 years in state prison. If it was a juvenile, it would be 6 years locked up as a juvenile. So wow. Each crime, each offense always has a maximum punishment time.
Mm-hmm.
And then here, delinquency, basically the procedural, you have a police contact, and police officers have different options. They can arrest them. They can do like a diversion program through the local police agency. then if they decide that they're going to be, this is typically juveniles, if they're going to be taken to juvenile hall, then they have a detention hearing within 48 hours. Judge will decide they're going to remain detained or they're going to be allowed to go home. And then there's a readiness conference where you try to work out a deal if at all possible. And then if they are found to be, they committed the offense, then they typically are given probation, or they can be sent to the Division of Juvenile Justice, which is prison for young people. And then there's periodically review hearings. Typically, the first time someone gets in trouble, they're usually not detained and they're given probation where they're allowed to remain in the house to prove that they can basically make the right decisions. And there's periodic review hearings to see how they're doing.
Wow.
And if they can be successful, then their record can be sealed and they get off probation. So this is kind of briefly the goals of dependency or the child abuse cases are basically protect the children, to reunify the parents if that's all possible. And for instance, let's assume the child was removed for the parents are using drugs. If the parents can demonstrate to the social worker and to the children's attorney and the judge that they can stop using drugs, well, they're going to get their children back. It doesn't happen overnight because with drug substance abuse, it takes a while for a parent to really demonstrate that they can remain drug-free and get their children back. If they're not able to do that, at the end, there's only a certain period of time that they're given to get the child back, either 12 months or 18 months. And if they can't, then the judge has to make a permanent plan for the child. If it happens to be a baby, typically the recommendation will be adoption and termination of parental rights.
Wow, that's pretty brutal, understandable, but brutal. So is there percentage rate in how successful delinquents are in getting their kids back?
Well, I'd say on the dependency side, I mean, it really depends. And I would have to say, I'd say if I had to put a percentage, I'd say maybe 70% of parents that have their children removed get their children back. If, for instance, exposure to domestic violence, they get involved in a program and they decide they learn how to, have their disputes in a way that doesn't put their children at risk. Drugs, they remain, drug-free. So that I'd have to guess about 70–75%.
No, well, I'm not, in your profession, but it sounds to me, if it's 70% of something like this, it seems to be a good percentage rate, actually, showing that the system is working.
Well, I think, Eric, generally speaking, the child protective system is a good system. I think generally it works. I mean, there's definitely children that parents are putting them at risk, and they should be removed. And there's a preference when the child is removed to be placed with a relative, to facilitate visitation and that type of thing. And, some parents, like in a case involving substance abuse, drugs, they can't deal with their addiction. Their addiction is more important to them than getting their children back. And, those are the children that need stability. And at the end, if their parents can't reunify, they need permanency, whether it's in a home with a relative or with, in a foster home or someone that wants to adopt them. And believe me, Eric, there's people standing in line to adopt children, particularly babies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just real quick, dependency, you got the CPS investigation, whether it's through a school, a hotline. I mean, there's a child abuse hotline where they get tips and they will basically evaluate, and they might remove the children from the home. Then there's a detention hearing. The children basically, are going to be placed in either Polinsky, which is basically like a foster home, or they're going to be placed with a relative. Then once they have the readiness hearing, disposition hearing, and then ultimately termination of parental rights. But typically a parent, if the child is not going to be returned to them immediately, they're given what's called a reunification plan. And that specifically tells them exactly what they need to do to get their children back. For instance, if it was substance abuse, Eric, they need to demonstrate, that they're clean and sober, random drug testing, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, the end result of juvenile law, once again, as far as on the left, any type of criminal offense is rehabilitation. And on the child abuse side, it's to reunify the parents with their children. And that would be the end of that presentation. And like I indicated before, I have different ones. I mean, you mentioned Rotary, and I've spoken at many Rotary clubs, and I have a similar presentation that, that I give, to
Yeah.
Rotarians.
Well, and I want to tell our viewers that they can actually reach out to you if they would like that presentation, outside of Rotary, other service clubs, because it is a very interesting subject. Personally, I think a subject that people just prefer not to talk about. I think, it's still a big taboo in our society. But I think it's also time, to get rid of that taboo, because it happens, unfortunately, on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter if it's a small community or a large community. It's just a matter of fact, a matter of life. And I commend you, for having stepped into that role and, taking those cases on. And it's just not easy, because this is, like, I would say, life nearly from its ugliest side, with people of a certain age, for them, where it's really hard for them to self-defend, basically.
It's a difficult area, because I think, let alone a death, or a contested, like, dissolution of marriage. I mean, when you accuse a parent of abusing their children, I mean, it's a tough situation, and it's something that you don't necessarily want to brag about, when you have a spat on a criminal side, but people need representation. There's a lot of times when people will call me Eric, and I'll just give them advice. I mean, I give free consultations in my office, now virtual, because of the whole situation we're in. But a lot of times I'll just give free advice, and that's good. I mean, and I've had a passion with Rotary, working with youth, because Rotary has a lot of nice, good programs for our youth, and that what attracted me to Rotary, because I've been dealing with youth on the criminal side for many, many, many years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Thank you also for your service to society. And, well, I sincerely hope that people will be reaching out to you and use your services to get things in order. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you, Eric, for inviting me. And I just want to be a resource for parents and, for anybody. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.